So the idea then is that what we also do now together, start the population here. And once they produce already a lot of warm humus, warm compost, and you still have food on the top, which is not digested yet. What will happen with the worms, they will be always in the lower layer, and then they eat themselves through the food and do their magic. And when you put new food, they just always like come to a higher level. So they never will be down usually, like in the deep part of the soil. But then what you then can do is you have 2 boxes. You can take the food in the top out. Take it over here, take the food out, put the food in here, put more food in there maybe, in addition, put it on top of that box, and then put it back on again, and then the worms crawl up into the upper box, and you easily can separate basically the worms from the humus, and then you wait a little bit, a couple of days, until they're really again settled in the new box, and then you can take out the middle box again, and you have the humus, which you can, the worm compost, which you can use. So this is the idea of the concept of having 3 boxes. Of course, there's also a different way how you can separate it. It's just 2 boxes, then you...
They're thick and heavy. I mean, you can kind of imagine that have quite mass. They sometimes don't get eaten. So it's important also then to if it's something big, you might want to pull it out. But you could also just put it in the soil, and it will eventually decompose in the soil if you put it out into the garden. But then I would just sort of mound up all of the castings, all the worm poop on this side, and then put fresh food, fresh waste over here, and then cover it with new bedding, and then they would just come over. So this is another way. And then the main other thing to do is that then when you're removing the compost, which is what I guess I was just referring to, is I often will do it like on a garbage bag, or it's nice if you have like a kind of a shallow container for it. Because then what you could do is that you pull it out, and they're going to go to the very bottom because they hate light. So then you would be able to harvest off the top, basically.
And then you have to do it a couple of times.
Exactly. Then you have to do it a couple of times. So you sort of pile on, take off the top layers, and then the bottom is full of worms. So maybe toss it back into the bin. Does this make sense?
Yeah. Cool. And that's like using light for that, right?
Because if you have them out of the bin, they'll immediately go as far away from the light as possible. So that's a good way to basically separate them from the castings. Yeah.
So they're opposite to moth.
Yeah. True. And one thought we had, which maybe isn't for today, but if things are going well and it feels like it's working and you don't have to do major other design changes, is it would be really nice to have a large piece of metal mesh on the bottom one. That's really thin mesh, because then they won't fall through into the teeth.
So that's what we need on our shopping list.
Yeah.
So
I don't have that on mine, and it's fine. But of course, some of them do fall into the teeth. It's just if the whole. Also because there's little baby ones. They're really tiny when they're born, when they're young. So it would be. But it's only if they're very curious that they'll fall in. I haven't lost very many that way.
And where exactly do you put the mesh?
You're thinking
put it up here on top of this one. So you fix it. You see the mesh and find a way to put it. But then, of course, still if you can put it on the other one, but then they don't fall in so easily. And in addition to putting it there, it would probably also good. This is like depending on. Now in summer it's probably a good thing to do. We also have to make holes in the top. So that there's enough air coming in, and also to put a mesh on top of that. And that's but a very thin holes really, so that then flies can't go in so easily and put their eggs. And you could also do that on the sides, like it's an additional thing. So, and this is, we talked about it before, it's a compost, there will always be flies, of course, somehow, and also mold. It's just part of it also, but if you want to have it not so many, this is one way of keeping flies to go in with the eggs. And then the second also, we will do that, is to always have a top layer of newspaper and or cardboard, like moist stuff, and this also keeps the flies from gerbil sitting on it and put the eggs. So this are two tricks for that. And coming also to that point that you will also find other animals with the worms. This can be, there's also two types of flies. So there's one animal, it's a little white one, like little white worms, and they are actually, they're good to have them in there. They're helping to do what is happening in here, but there shouldn't be too many. If there's too many little white worms, that means that it's not that pH doesn't really is right. It's too sour. It would mean that it's too sour, and then it would be good to put some calc in it, for example, and to just put it on top so that it's not anymore so sour. But a little bit of these small white ones is good. And then it can happen that killer acid you would find, maybe some acid in there. It's not a problem. And then there's a third animal, which is called spring.
Oh yeah, springbok.
Spinner or something. How do you call it in English again?
I mean, I have a lot of creatures. I have a lot of creatures in mind, and I haven't had to
Get everyone on board to taking care of that.
But this version is especially for inside, or can we put it also outside?
It can be also outside, inside and outside. It's just important the temperature, to look at the temperature. So I think I mentioned they like between 15 to 25 degrees, so you shouldn't have it like in now you can't have it in the sun, at least it needs to be in the shade or a cooler place, and in the winter you have to take it inside. If it's under 15 degrees, then we freeze.
At the moment we just can't
They would die.
But what do
It could be in the shade.
In the shade now?
In the shade.
Yeah.
During the last days.
Yeah, the last days are
Like a shade, cool place, not like a shade where it's. And I mean, they can also for a while, it can also be hotter, but it's not their favorite.
They start dying at above 30.
For us,
Yeah, they're pretty
we
much-
can live really when it's really hot, it's okay for us. Yeah.
You can, I mean, for future reference, if you want to do this at home and you have outdoor space, you can do it outside too, but then you have to insulate it. Because they'll die if it freezes.
Yeah.
And they'll die if it's too hot. They just don't like it.
And in nature, what do the worms do then? If you have a pile in the garden and it's connected to the soil under it, do they go deeper into the soil, or do they just die and next year the eggs?
Well, it's different worms also.
Okay.
The earthworms, which are the ones that you usually find in the soil, are surface dwelling, so that's why they can't do this. They don't like it. So these are like, you also are night crawlers. This is like the word that you're using in English, but I don't know if it's a similar word.
Yeah. I'm not sure.
In English, we call them European night crawlers and American night crawlers, which are these Insana fetida and Insana, I forget what the other one's called.
Yeah, we have Dobindina, I think.
Oh, Germania, yeah. So, but I actually don't really have a very good understanding. I think that they are fine as long, I guess because it's producing heat. So it must be that this is part of why they're okay. Like in sort of, natural, so-called natural environments. Did you read much about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely, I mean, if you would take the soil out and you put them, some of them would go outside, it's not a problem. They will just go on doing what they will do in there. Their winter, I didn't really look up their winter strategy. I guess worms have one. I would look into that. Like snails have one, probably one of the best ones within the little creature world, or because they carry their own habitat with them. But I know for like what I did read is like where you basically can see, for example, that it's the boxes too cold is like when they go make clumps, like or huddles, like a huddle, then they try to warm each other.
Oh.
I don't know how
Maybe it's a
that's
similar strategy in the winter. if you're
yeah,
outside.
and I guess like you said, they
Probably
probably have
have
to
to
survive.
survive.
I would look into that up.
That would be interesting to think about is maybe actually this is like a nicer, kinder environment. Maybe they're going to be longer living because a lot of them wouldn't make it through the winter in real life. I don't know, that'd be curious to
Which
look
is
up.
kind of,
It's true for a lot of us.
a lot of other animals too at the end.
Although I guess kind of nicer, kinder, longer. Those two things don't necessarily equal each other, so maybe that's a question. A long life but a miserable one, or what's really exciting?
This is really exciting. Let's see. So, okay, and then, so this is the first level, which I mentioned to Linda, if you want to ever do one again, or thinking about it, of course, this one could also just be half size, it doesn't need to be this 12 size for the do it. And so then we put the second box. And basically this could be also the warm compost, but we just have 3 because it's more practical in use, more handy. So we put the 2 boxes now we're making, we do the same style. We drill holes in the hole. Now we have to drill holes in the whole bottom so that the fluid can go into the lower box. And ideally we also drill holes here, like little holes, or in the upper part so that air can get inside, additional to these. And then we do the same with the second box. You now really have to make a map,
Like a grid.
like a grid.
A grid of holes. I mean, also because you want, right, so there's 2 parts of the logic. We want all of the liquid, excess liquid, to be going down into the bottom so that it's collected for the tea, because that's also a danger. It's like there's this, the happy medium of not too moist and not too dry. And so if there's a good system for the tea to get out, this is important, and then we need to have a good system for the worms to move. So somehow, so the holes provide this both at the same time. No?
The importance of infrastructure.
Although, what's interesting too is that the one thing I was thinking about, which I mean, this is like these kind of important design details that we didn't know until we saw the boxes that you have, but they won't be able to get through if there's a huge space between the surface of this compost and the bottom of the next one. So it might be that you'd like almost like pile it here, almost, so that there's a good contact between the boxes so they can get through. You know what I mean? So that's just, I mean, this is the thing that you'll know once you have enough worms and enough compost, which we can't exactly foresee right now. But hopefully it works. I mean, I've heard very good things. I have a couple friends that have this kind of layout and it works really well. But it might be like a little bit of figuring it out as you go. I have just the 2-box style, which means that it's a big process where you have to like pull, like I basically pull out a bunch of the castings and pick out worms. And yeah, so I think this is much nicer. If it works. Yeah, but there might be a little bit of trial and error to figure out how to get it to be working at kind of peak level.
Yeah. And I mean, if you want to harvest like soil before you have enough, of course you would need to go back to that idea of taking the food away. I mean, I think you, finding your own way of like getting to what you
Maybe
want.
it's useful also just to say that there's 2 main ways that people generally do it. If you don't have the system and if it's not working, is what I tend to do actually is, and it's not rocket science, but like you get to a point where a lot of the food has been eaten, but you're still trying to get them to really eat the last bits. Well, then you can just sort of leave it for a little while and sort of test them to like, get them kind of hungry so that they eat what's remaining, and then try to get it to a point that you're ready to harvest it, that you feel that it's in good shape. And oftentimes, especially I would say like, open up a spot that you can close back up with bedding, put the food in, and cover it up.
Okay.
So that way there's no food to the air. This is really what will keep down the flies and the smell.
And in 2 days we have a look if the food is eaten.
And I would really let them have at least a few days of getting situated before you feed them, but you can, now that we have that there and it's not so much, you can see.
And how often do we need to make the bedding? Or
Well, basically what will happen is that the bedding will turn into this. That was really silly. I really should have brought some of mine with me just so you could see. I have pictures. Layer bedding on top. So that then, although I think this time I'm probably going to pull a bunch out because I need to really harvest some. So basically you'll get to a point where it's going to look like this. But really, that means you definitely really need bedding. But the other way that you know is if there's nowhere left to put food, then you need bedding to be able to put in food. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Because you never want to put in food and not be able to cover it. So if you've used up all the spots, so I sort of, in mine, I sort of have these kind of, this that I think of as the spots that I can dig. And if there aren't any spots left, then I know I need to make new bedding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, what happens also is that then you check here, because this is the one you did the first day, or here, let's say, since we just did this one. If it's gone, then you can put new in, of course, right? Because they've now eaten it all.
Okay.
But it's not a bad idea to just have a habit of putting in, especially when you first start it, to put in bedding sort of as you put in the food. Because also the danger is that if you have more food than bedding, then it goes from aerobic to anaerobic, which I do not know how to say it. It's the same. And then they get sick. So it's important to have a good ratio of bedding to food waste.
Look how fast from the rest.
Yeah.
And you don't make the paper wet basically. You
Yeah.
just put it in dry.
And then that's like a good test that you can do that and then look at it the next day and see, is the paper all wet? Then you know, like, okay, it was overly wet, so it's good that you did that, and then you can kind of keep an eye on it, see if you need to put in more paper.
And
But
it's
with the
also
dripping,
like what
it
you
should
did
be-
before, like how Angela showed that it should have this consistency. So you see that it's not dripping full of water when you have it in your hands, and when it's like too really like, if you press it and it's really water spreading out, it's definitely too wet. You have to do something.
But the good thing is that with this structure, you should be in really good shape. That the wet should just go down to the bottom, so you shouldn't be getting too wet in general. Like right now, mine is that I haven't drained this, and I think there's so much in there now because mine's much shorter, this part. So I think it's now that the wet is actually at the bottom, of the bin. But that would only happen if you let it go all the way out.